good idea to have the Shia death cult armed with nuclear bombs. I really don't. But I also don't believe it's a good idea to have America pounding around the world as the world's policeman and trying to de-Islamify the Middle East and sending young American boys out to die to do so. Because what happens in the Middle East is up to Middle Easterners. If they want to cut off 8-year-old children because they steal a loaf of bread when they're starving, then that's entirely up to them. And American boys shouldn't be sent to fight and die to stop it.
All the way in the back.
I'd like to put this in American context, in terms of America. There's one major thing that contradicts your argument. Muslims have been here in America since 1619, since the first slaves were brought here. But what we see in an American context, we see Muslims trying to control their own community. We see Muslims sending their kids to school. We see Muslims participating in democracy. But what have we seen with white people, white terrorists? We see the Ku Klux Klan lynch and burn and kill people. What we see with white terrorists.
What about orange pants? Sit the fuck down!
You will sit down and let me finish my question. Sit down and shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
I'm talking. I'm talking. Sit down and shut up. I'm gonna finish my question.
They shut us down. Thank you for shutting them down.
I'm just offering something that kind of contradicts your argument. That basically what we see, when you look at the history of Muslims in America, what we see is them trying to actually assimilate themselves into American society. We don't have that record. But what do we see with organizations that identify with white nationalism? What we see is terrorism. We see lynchings. And we see iterations of that today. With the new sting I'm sure you probably heard about. There was a black woman that was raped by 6 white people fairly a couple weeks ago. So I'm going to give you a chance to respond. I'm going to give you a chance to respond. But what we see here is a contradiction that white nationalists are the ones that have been terrorists in America, not Muslims. So please respond to that contradiction.
Passionately, so I assume he wants to hear the answer, so please let me answer, and then hound me down when I finish. First of all, the point about Muslims being here since that very early stage, because they warred over as slaves. With respect, the majority of black people in America today are here because they were sold into slavery by Islamic slave traders to Christian and Jewish slave traders. Just as now in places like Darfur, where you have a war, a genocide against the animist Christian South by the Arab Muslim North. And I understand how many black people in America have converted to Islam and feel it's a wonderful thing. I've met members of the Nation of Islam, and I've seen what, for instance, they do in communities which have been ravaged by drugs, and what they do is a good thing. So I can understand you having this passionate attachment to Islam, but don't let that fool you into accepting propaganda, because, as I say, traditionally, Islam is the great slaving religion of the world. And the other thing is that the difference between the almost homegrown black Muslims of the United States of America and what we face in Britain and what you will face here in due course is that you are not brought up and indoctrinated with this extraordinarily strict and harsh and brutally racist and misogynistic Islam.
You've been brainwashing your children, so what's the difference?
So there is a huge, huge difference. And one final thing, although the likes of Gaddafi has on occasions thrown money at groups like the Nation of Islam in order to cause embarrassment for the government of the United States, and I've been to his house which was bombed and his little daughter killed, so I understand why he was angry and why he did things like that. But don't let that make you think that the Arab Muslims would have anything for you other than contempt, because their word for a black is slave in their language. And that's an unfortunate simple fact. The one last thing, just as I was accused of being selective in terms of rapes and so on, you cannot begin to talk about rape in America without at least accepting that while you quoted I'm sure a true case of a white girl being raped, sorry, a black girl being raped by white men. Equally, the majority of interracial rapes in this country are by black men or white men.
It's so true. Look at crime reports, you morons.
You look it up on the internet.
Right here, man, the phone out. You.
Look it up on the internet. It's completely untrue.
36,000
I'll tell you what, you go to Detroit tomorrow night and walk down the streets of someone.
Look at these problems, but then you attribute it to some unique characteristic of certain problems. There are problems across
Like I said, like sand black
people,
rapes.
and you only look at one certain group of people and say, see, it's these people. But then you turn an eye to like white.
But don't you do the same thing? When you look at what the Nazis did in Eastern Europe to the Jews, and then you extrapolate that from that anybody who wants to preserve a European identity is going to gas at exterminating people. You're guilty of precisely the same thing you accuse me of. But it's human nature, isn't it? Go on, another question.
Here's one right here in the hat.
You said a couple of things about global history and politics, which are as distorted as you read about humanity. You talked about Sikh suffering in India, a region where I'm from. You talked about Hindu suffering. I don't know if you read about contemporary news and politics and how just yesterday news agencies found out in this sting operation that the Indian government sponsored a genocide of Muslims.
Well, in 48.
Racism does exist in every segment of society.
It does.
Like sick people exist in every segment of society. That is
No, carry on. I was applauding your point. Yeah.
For me, you are not a blot in humanity. You are a kid who has been failed by his parents. The more we don't oppose him and create him chaos, the more that we hide the stupidity.
Do you need a hug?
Your
Not from you.
Are you gay? Maybe he wants a
to organizations when you were 8 years old. You would deny that.
That's true.
And that is why you have turned out into a person who needs mental and medical attention.
MSU will pay for it.
I have grown up in a war zone and seen people die. I come from Kashmir. I don't know if you're narrow-minded political geography of the world.
I know precisely where Kashmir is, and I know what the problem is.
I'm glad. I know what side is the problem you will talk about because it will all be full of how Islam has made things worse.
No, I'll tell you what I know about. I'll tell you what I know about.
Let him finish.
You
Okay.
can talk to me as long as you want. Let me finish. Give me 2 minutes.
Okay, 2 minutes, and then we'll come back
Let
to
me
it. All right.
finish. Let me finish. It has been a characteristic of things getting screwed up in every part of the world that at one point of the time, those organizations that are now screwing up the world were promoted and financially supported by Western white powers, be it Afghanistan, be it Iraq, be it Iran. You toppled up democracy in that state, powers that condone what happened there. So you have absolutely no right to talk about racism in those countries. If you talk about racism in the Arab world, that again is a section of society that has been financially aided by white supremacists and racists. If you tell me that you have a right to come here, gobble up millions of gallons of oil from the Middle East, and still tell me that you have a right to tell everybody here that you or your country in no way is dependent on the Middle East and has never promoted illegal activities in those areas and ruined our democracy, our institutions, at the cost of our people and our human rights, then you are right.
All right, thank you. It didn't exist elsewhere in the world. What I know about the Kashmir, what I know about, no, you had your question, how did me answer it, then you come back
You
afterwards.
said something about democracy is not the Western invention. What are you talking about?
Of course democracy is the Western invention. The Greeks